Hello everyone and welcome back to Sabres of Infinity. So in the last video we managed to finally complete our training and such, and now we're finna go ahead and get sent to the war with the League of Antar and try and fight for king and country and all that good stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much all that's happened. Nothing has really happened as far as the state of the war. It's pretty much the same as it was in the last video. And that's pretty much it. I think I've pretty much covered every single thing I can think of. Also, one other thing too, if you hear any noise in the background, it's because my the last video is rendering right now. It just screwed me over a second ago too, so that's always fun. But yeah, it's rendering right now, so you might hear that noise in the background. I do have noise dampening and suppression on, so maybe you won't hear it. Should be fine. Also, last thing too is that I am recording these videos in succession. So if you have any tips or anything like that that you may have left in the last video, I probably didn't see it because again, I'm doing these back to back. So I'm not sure how many I'm going to record. I usually try to record at least 3 or 4 videos, maybe even 5 videos. So that way I have enough for the entire week. And because I work a full-time job in the process, a little hard to try and do that throughout the week. But yeah, so hopefully I'll go ahead and record as many videos as necessary. Also, what is my mouse thingy doing? I saw the little blue thing. That makes me worried. Okay, it didn't do anything. Hopefully it won't do anything else. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Also, I do apologize if anything pops up on the screen and stuff like that, because unfortunately I have to screen capture this because of the way my recording software works. I'm using OBS, and OBS does not like recording these games for some odd reason. I don't know. You can't full screen them or anything like that. So, yep, one of the growing pains. And also, I won't have any music in this video. As I said, I'll do one with music and one without. If you like it, then let me know in the comment section and I'll put music in there. If you don't like it, let me know in the comment section and I will keep the music out. It's fine either way. Anywho, the first few days of your sea voyage could not possibly be counted as eventful. The hours are parceled into an endless cycle of drums and bells, with only the pendulous back and forth movement of the deck as proof that you're even traveling at all. Elson spends most of his time heaving his guts out over the railing. Casarosa passes his days either entirely engrossed in silent prayer or face deep in his books, namely, Histories of the League of Antar and its competent peoples. While it's no doubt good to learn about your enemy, it does not make him any more sociable. The sailors are, to a man, too busy to pay attention to the spurious questionings of a band of turf-loving fops of HMS Victorious company of some 400 men and officers. Only the half company of grim, stolid Royal Marines pay you and your fellow dragoons any heed. Despite the normal inter-service rivalry which tends to crop up between the Royal Marines and the rest of the army, they are more than happy to show you some guidance when it comes to navigating the seedier aspects of the soldier's trade. What do you do in the first few days of your sea journey? So if we go ahead and look at our stats over here, and hopefully again I won't be interrupted by my recording software. As of the spring of the 602nd year of the old imperial era, Darren de Aldrich Hahn is age 18. He's a cornet. He has a wealth of 60 and an income of 5. He's really good at soldering. He absolutely sucks in the charisma department, and he has a fairly decent intellect. So since my soldering is pretty high right off the bat, I don't remember exactly how much this increases. And if I'm not mistaken, in Sabres of Infinity, I think the increases or decreases to your stats are actually dependent upon your age. So, of course, if you're older, it doesn't it doesn't jump and lower as much. Whereas if you're younger, I think it increases and decreases more. But I might be wrong about that too. So, since my soldering is pretty high, I'm going to try and focus on my intellect. My reputation is also kind of screwed too, but though that can be dealt with a little bit easier than, say, my charisma. I don't think my charisma is ever going to get much greater than it is. So I think I'll just go ahead and focus on my intellect, and I will do so by choosing the option of to brush up on my knowledge of the League of Antar. Of course, I can pick up some fighting tips from the Marines, try to socialize with the common sailors, make conversation with the ship's officers, and I think that will increase my reputation. But yeah, I'm going to brush up on my knowledge of the League of Antar. You manage to borrow a few charts and text from the Victorious's midshipmen and begin the process of getting to know your enemy. The League of Antar is a vast nation comprising the whole of the Collegian continent where northern civilization at first arose. While once ruled by an imperial family, the Antari now swear fealty to no monarch, instead being governed by the League Congress, an assembly of several hundred noble lords, each with the right to vote and veto each other's motions in the assembly chamber. You also learn about the Antari way of war, not much removed from the Takaran descended doctrine the king's army uses, but one which places less emphasis on infantry and more on heavy cavalry, namely the powerful noble-born church hussars, with their bane-ruined banded mail and arcs of feather and steel lashed to their saddles and made to look like angels' wings. Over the next few days, as you study the history of your enemy, you realize that the Antari are less different than you had thought. They too rebelled against tyrants, fought to unify their lands, and had great men and women whose martyrdoms elevated them to sainthood. It almost seems a pity that your nations, so alike in many ways, must be at war. Almost. And as you can see, that helped my intellect quite a bit. Now it's at 36. All right. In the early morning of your 5th day at sea, you awake to the sounds of drums and the louder, deeper beat of someone frantically pounding at your door. It is one of the Victorious's midshipmen. In a squeaky, terrified voice, he announces that the Victorious has sighted a merchantman flying the White Eagle on red of the League of Antar. The boy, barely 12, tells you that Captain Walken has made the decision to break off from the rest of the flotilla and engage the enemy vessel directly. As you walk up into the quarterdeck, you can hear the Victorious's captain laying out the situation plainly both to his own lieutenants and your own senior officers. A fat, slow merchant vessel would be an excellent source of prize money. Both the cargo and the heavy, capacious hull of the captured vessel itself would be worth a substantial amount of cash once she sailed back to a Tierran port and sold. However, he notes sourly, no Antari merchant vessel would be so stupid as to travel unescorted, especially this close to the Tierran naval base at Northern Pillars. He quickly concludes that the vessel is likely a trap, packed to the brim with heavily armored Antari soldiers ready to overwhelm any boarding party. Despite the protests of his own officers, you hear him insist that the risk is worth the reward. He restates his orders to capture the enemy vessel. Within half an hour, you see the Antari vessel for yourself. She is a lubberly, ungainly thing floating low in the water. As the minutes pass, it becomes clear that the Antari vessel will not escape. Its hull is too fat, and the sailplane it carries was obsolete half a century ago. As you draw closer, you can see the deck of the merchant vessel. Her raised forecastle and quarterdeck are overflowing with mobs of Antari sailors, armed with clubs, axes, cutlasses, and a smattering of muskets. They are hardly a professional fighting force, but it is clear that they plan on defending their ship to the death. A pair of Marines rush past you, long rifled muskets hanging off their backs, snipers. They grab onto the rigging and begin climbing up the ropes with simian grace. Your eyes follow them as they hoist themselves up to the tops of the Mysian mast, passing the half-dozen Marines already in position in the rigging. Suddenly, a puff of smoke issues from the form of one of the Marines. A sharp crack echoes across the deck. The Antari at the wheel of the other ship clutches his forehead and falls to the deck, his face a ruin. More gunshots ring out, more Antari die. The Antari merchantman is barely a few hundred meters away. From your position on deck, you can see its ragged crew bracing themselves for a boarding action. Even from the distance, you can hear their taunts and prayers in their alien tongue. The thunder of a broadside issues from the Victorious's guns. The Antari vessel is showered in gore as grape shot tears apart those crewmen unlucky enough to be caught in the open. The Victorious's deck, already cleared for action, is filling with the orange-coated bodies of 24 barefooted Marines assembled in ranks, muskets in hand. You realize with a start that a few of your fellow dragoons, Elson and Kazarosta among them, are rushing in to fill out their ranks. Each new addition is given a warm nod and a slap on the back from the grizzled salt and pepper-haired Marine sergeants leading the boarding party. The lieutenant watching beside you grimaces. Poor stupid fools. Captain Walken said he'd give any volunteer a cut of the prize. Bloody stupid. Men without their sea legs have no place in a boarding action. They'll get themselves killed. The naval officer has a point. The deck still feels slick and unsteady under your feet. The lieutenant leans forward, squinting as if he cannot believe his own eyes. Saints have mercy. I think one of your friends is trying to convince poor Sergeant Torreston to let him lead the action. You look down to see Casarosta pushing himself to the head of the formation, towards the NCOs readying to board. The lieutenant's frustration and shock are palpable. No matter how veteran the victorious Marine sergeant, he would have no choice but to give way to a commissioned officer, no matter how junior, including you, in fact, if you had a mind to lead yourself. You decide to take command. We should not leave the conduct of battle to a mere sergeant. Join the boarding party. I will show them the stuff that the Royal Dragoons are made of. Go below deck. I shouldn't get in the way. The Marines are trained for this sort of thing. I'm not. Or try to talk the other Dragoons in the boarding party out of it. They'll only get themselves killed. So, again, since I'm a fighter, I will go ahead and try and jump into the fray of this. Now, if I had probably more charisma, I could probably take command, but I don't know how that would actually turn out, because if I turned around and led the thing and then I didn't have a high enough status as far as fighting goes, might get myself killed. But I will join the boarding party since I'm supposed to be a fighter and all ruthless and stuff. You take your leave of the third lieutenant and walk up to the gathering boarding party. A willing volunteer. Elson smiles as you take a place next to him. Come for your share of the glory Come for your share of the glory after all, have you, dear fellow? He says as he looks over his pistol. Very good indeed. There'll be plenty of glory for everyone today. As you return Elson's grin, you see Casarosa whispering to the sergeant in command of the Marines. Their hushed conversation grows heated for a moment, then the sergeant slowly nods and stands upright. He explains that Casarosa has convinced him that the party must be commanded by an officer, and thus the Dragoon lieutenant is to take command. A wave of complaint washes over the Marines, though some of the Dragoons clearly find the fact that they are to be commanded by one of their own heartening. The sergeant quickly quiets any dissension with a wave of his hand. The shape of the enemy ship looms large off the port side. There's no time for anything save the final preparations for the upcoming battle. By the time you take your place and finish checking over your saber and pistol, the Victorious is barely 20 meters away from the staggering Antari vessel. Casarosa takes his place at the head of the boarding party. Marines, with me. Set a firing line of 2 ranks as we cross. Elson, look for Banecasters. Another volley of cannon fire assaults your ears. Once again, thunder and flame lash across the stricken enemy vessel's side. As the smoke clears, the sergeant gives the order to lower the gangplanks. A handful of Marines crawl forward, carrying heavy wooden boards. At a prearranged signal, they slip the boarding planks over the top of the sailcloth bulwarks as more Marines atop the quarterdeck and forecastle hurl grappling hooks over the side. Before long, the lines haul the stricken enemy vessel up against the oaken side of the Victorious. The sergeant signals that they are ready to go, and Casarosa gives the order. Tierra and victory, advance. One by one, you shuffle across the narrow gangplank with Casarosa and the Marines leading the way somewhere ahead of you. The choking powder fog is thick enough to obscure you from Antari snipers, but not enough to disorient you. You step onto the deck of the enemy ship just as the smoke clears. The deck of the Antari vessel is a still life of carnage. The dead are everywhere, transfixed by musket balls, ripped asunder by grape shot, or torn to shreds by splinters. The wooden deck is slick with gore. The iron-sweet smell of spilled blood and burned flesh forces its way up your nostrils. You feel a curious tugging sensation from the corner of your mind. Flowing streams of faint, sickly green light play patterns across your vision. Before you can make any mention of it, you hear Elson's voice from ahead. Banefire, get down. You hit the blood-soaked deck in time to see a wave of green light wash towards you with a muffled whoomph. You keep your head down as the intense heat sears your back and green light burns your eyes through your tightly shut eyelids. The Marine sergeant is the first one up. Platoon, form ranks. Let's find us some Antar to The sergeant orders are stopped mid-sentence as he falls limp. dying fingers scrabbling at the gaping hole at his throat. The man who killed him is standing not 15 paces away, his now empty pistol already dropping on the deck. Behind him are dozens of Antari soldiers in leather and mail pouring out from the forecastle and quarterdeck. With a great roar, they charge you en masse. Casarosa springs into action. Elson, take the Marines, seize the forecastle. Draken, stay here with Darnell and Higgins and guard the gangplanks. The rest of you to the quarterdeck with me. With a few quick orders, Casarosa regains control of the situation. As the mass of Tierran soldiers splits up into three groups, the Antari stop short in the confusion, their momentum halted by the sudden dispersal of their foes. By the time they begin to move forward again, it is too late. A volley of musket fire echoes from the forecastle, cutting down half a dozen attackers. The irregular rhythm of pistol fire sounds from aft, picking off more Antari. A pistol ball slams into the deck beside you, courtesy of an Antari soldier who is quickly downed by a sniper atop the Victorious's mast. Then they are upon you. The lead Antari lunges towards you, a long-headed Alpike in his hand. The weapon's long spike point is vicious looking, but slow, and you easily direct the blow away from the flat of your saber. You throw yourself forward, inside the Antari's guard. Two quick strokes with your saber, and he falls with gaping wounds to the chest and throat. You step forward to finish him off. You thrust the heavy steel blade into the man's chest and twist, just as you were taught in training. Blood fountains from your victim's mouth as he goes limp. You've just killed your first man. The battle does not last long past that. Attacked on three fronts and obviously unsuited to fighting aboard ships, the fight goes out of the Antari quickly. Within a few minutes, all the resistance ends. Casarosa leads the entire boarding party through one last sweep of the ship, rounding up prisoners and negotiating terms with the ship's officer. Soon, Lieutenant Briggins of the Victorious comes over the gangplank with a pair of midshipmen and 24 able seamen to form a prize crew. You're relieved and are sent back to the Victorious with other dragoons and half of the surviving Marines. You reach your cabin before the others and collapse eagerly onto your cot. You awake a few hours later to the sound of an insistent fist pounding on your cabin door. It is once again one of the Victorious's midshipmen. Captain Walken has requested your presence at a debriefing meeting held in the ward room. You dress quickly and put some vain effort into making yourself presentable before stepping out onto the cool evening air. The Victorious's crew moves around you as you walk across the deck. Some are busy loading supplies onto the newly captured Antari vessel, whilst others are repairing the damage inflicted on both ships during the battle. Soon, the captured prize will be sent back to the Tierran naval base at Northern Pillars, while the Victorious continues north towards Antar. The wardroom is full to bursting as you enter. Casarosa, Elson, and Captain Montez are on one side, while Captain Walken of the Victorious and two of his lieutenants sit on the other, with 3rd Lieutenant Briggins standing before them, making a report on the state of the prize vessel. Our prize is a grain ship, nothing too valuable. It was likely sailing south to Calendria or Takara to trade grain for weaponry. I suppose its owner decided to rig a surprise for us in case it was attacked. It was most unfortunate that we did not bag this one returning north. We could have all taken Calendrian swords as trophies. You take the seat reserved for you as Briggins finish by proclaiming his newly captured prize ready to set sail within the hour. Now Walken turns to you and your fellow dragoons. Major Montez, for an army captain, is always addressed as Major at sea as to avoid confusion aboard ship. I would first like to congratulate your men for their work in today's action. Allow me to offer them my compliments first, lest the criticism to follow breaks their unhardened spirits. Walken shakes Montez's hand and continues on. Captain Walken turns to Casarosa, his expression furious. Lieutenant Casarosa, you were in command of this fiasco, were you not? When Casarosa answers in the affirmative, Walken all but explodes. Half a dozen of my Marines are dead, including my best sergeant, another 8 wounded, all because some entitled death-born idiot wanted to play officer. Casarosa defends himself without hesitation. his face a carefully constructed mask. With all due respect, sir, his tone making it clear how little respect that meant, I ordered Cornet Elson to look for Bane casting, which he did. A Bane blood would Walken cuts him off with a brisk wave. A proper Bane blood would have avoided this altogether. All good men are dead because you did not know your place. It is my opinion that the rotten fruit of such hideous miscongentation, whatever that is, should have no place in His Majesty's army. Walken goes on like this for an hour, berating Casarosta and criticizing just about every single part of his battle plan. Your fellow dragoon does nothing but sit there, stone-faced. It is clear that he has faced such abuse many times before. Finally, the captain concludes, Major, I expect you to punish this incompetent for the lives that he has wasted. Dismissed. You shuffle out of the ward room in a dark mood. You return to the cabin with Elson as you see Montez and Casarosa in a whispered conversation with Captain Walken. Soon after, Casarosa returns. Drained of emotion, he conveys the news that he has been stripped of his brevet and has been officially reprimanded. With the dark news, he immediately goes to bed, refusing to answer either you or Elson's request for details. You and Elson stare at each other for a moment, but despite your best efforts, neither of you can muster the energy to say anything to each other. Exhausted, you return to sleep. The Victorious's prize ship and the Lieutenant Brigand's prize crew leave at dawn. The next few days are uneventful. The wind is good and the weather is calm. You spend the time as you did before, aimlessly speaking with sailors, officers, and your fellow dragoons. After another week, the lookout finally announces that he has spotted the bleak gray of the Antaric coast on the horizon. So, it turned into a shit show. Not really a shit show. It was more of a situation between Casarosa and the captain. So, yeah. Basically, I think he just kind of threw him under the bus because it was only a grain ship. Anywho, what follows is an interminable period of waiting. Having reached the Antari coast and rendezvoused with the rest of the squadron, the Victorious must now wait for the wind to change enough for it to complete the last stretch of its journey, sailing west along the coast to reach the Tierran-held port of Noringia, where you and the rest of your regiment are to disembark and make final preparations before proceeding to the front. For the next week and a half, you wait, with nothing to do besides fish, read, and indulge in idle conversation. On the 10th day of waiting, the lookouts report a ship approaching from the south, a small, sleek vessel flying the Griffin and Tower of Tierra. The vessel is a courier sent directly from the naval base at Northern Pillars. Aboard are dispatches from Grenadier Square for Captain Montez, as well as orders for Captain Walken. In addition, the vessel brings news that the Antari merchantman the Victorious had captured has already been bought out. As a result, the prize money due to the ship's crew and members of the boarding party is duly doled out. Your share comes, to your surprise, in a brown leather pouch filled with gold coins. No banknotes, lads, the courier explains. No Tierran banks in Antar. Banknotes ain't much use if you can't cash them. Casarosa and Elson each receive their own pouches. For your part in the boarding action, you are given an officer's share of the prize money. While the 50 crowns you receive is hardly a fortune, it is a comfortable augmentation to your current funds. So yeah, I got 50 gold for that. So that leaves me with a wealth of 110. Now I don't know. I know that there's some things later on that you can use with your wealth, but I still need to improve my income because that's going to come into play later on. But still, we'll see. The next day, the wind changes and the squadron continues on its way. 2 days later, you finally make landfall on Antari soil. Also, did that affect my reputation? It actually didn't affect my reputation. I'm surprised. But I guess it's because my reputation is still shite. So, all right, chapter 3. Let's see if there's anything else. Let me see. State of the war. Nope, nothing has changed here. It's still the same. We do have some personages of importance. We have Michael Briggins, born 578 OIE, lieutenant in the Royal Tierran Navy, 3rd Lieutenant, HMS Victorious, Baneless. Caius de All Casarosta, cornet of the Royal Dragoon Regiment, illegitimate son of the Countess of Lianscourt, Deathborn. We have Sir Johannes de All Findlay, Duke of Canaris, Lord Colonel of the Royal Dragoon Regiment, Knight Grand Master of the Order of St. Jerome, a sitting member of the courts and a head of the noble house of Findlay, Banecaster of the 8th caliber. Lord Davis de All Elson, cornet of the Royal Dragoon Regiment, eldest son of the Baron of Hawthorne, a poor but politically influential court's noble, in possession of aspirations to knighthood, Banecaster of the 3rd caliber. Sir Alfred de All Montez, the commanding officer of the 3rd Squadron of the Royal Dragoon Regiment, holds the rank of captain, Baneblood. His Tierran Majesty King Miguel I of House Rendower, reigning monarch of the United Kingdom of Tierra, as well as Duke of Vittoria, young and impetuous but capable, Baneblood. Richard Walken, RN, captain of the list in the Royal Tierran Navy, commanding officer HMS Victorious, Baneless. All right. So let's go ahead and get back to the game, shall we? All right, chapter 3, wherein the cavalry officer makes landfall at the port of Noringia and prepares to discharge his martial duty. The Antari port town of Noringia is far from impressive. Nestled between two low hills, the cluster of strange, steep-roofed houses is hardly a match for the glittering beacon spires of Otoria or the orderly mills of Tannisburg. However, that has not stopped the town and the bay it presides over from bustling with activity. As the Victoria sails into Noringia's sheltered harbor, you see a forest of masts, supply vessels, horse transports, line of battle ships, and lean frigates like the Victorious, each flying the Griffin and Tower of Tierra, crowd the port, looming over the shattered defenses which the local lord had tried to use in vain to hold off the royal army. It takes almost 4 hours for the Victorious to weave its way through the shoals, breakwaters, and other ships into its assigned place in the harbor. As you pass other vessels, you hear a scattered back and forth of hails, cheers, and shouted hellos from your ship to the others. One vessel, a third rate of 74 guns flying the red and white pennon of a rear admiral over the Griffin and Tower, offers no response. Her crew is too busy trying to keep her afloat in spite of the massive house-sized hole punched into her hull. Montez is on the first boat. As he departs, he orders everyone to assemble with other squadrons of the regiment in the town square. By the time you say your farewells and are bundled on a boat, it is past midday. Neither Casarosta or Elson are on the boat with you, leaving you with only the faces of a dozen rankers and a handful of very taciturn oarsmen for company. The time seems to pass slowly. Every sloshing sweep of the oar seems to last an eternity. After an hour of torturous monotony, your boat finally pulls up on the primitive wooden pier. You half expect something momentous to happen as you set your foot down on the weather-beaten planks, some kind of fanfare to announce your arrival on this foreign and hostile land. Yet there's nothing. Thousands of men like you serving the same king have already landed on this very pier. Thousands more will likely do the same in the days to come. Your arrival is no special occasion. As you walk down the pier and join the other assembled dragoons waiting in the town square, you learn that Captain Montez, like the other squadron commanders, has been called away to a staff meeting with His Grace, the Duke of Canaris. The assembled regiment has inevitably reduced itself to knots of friends and acquaintances. It seems that no amount of training in the world is going to help 1,200 young men standing still in the sun unless someone is yelling at them to do so. After a few minutes of waiting by yourself, Casarosa finds you in the crowd and greets you with a grim wave. He tells you that it is likely that you and he will be assigned to different places along the front. The land of southern Antar is too forested, too rugged for large unit cavalry work. They'll want us as skirmishers. Only a complete idiot would not split us up along the entire line, so that we might exploit weak points and head off enemy raids when needed. Perhaps when we break into the open plains to the north, we shall meet again. You realize belatedly that this is his roundabout way of saying goodbye. Before you can speak further, the two of you see a party of officers, led by the Duke himself, approaching the square. You and Casarosa part without a word and quickly form into ranks with the others. The portrait of Frontinac's court does not do the Duke justice. In the full harness of a knight of the Saint Joshua, he casts an imposing figure, towering at least half a head over most of the men of the regiment. His armor shines in the setting sun, bane runes glowing a fey blue, invisible to all but bane-blooded eyes. Dragoons, welcome to Antar. His voice rolls over you, a rich baritone laden with authority. When His Majesty made the decision to fight the Antari on the home soil, we all knew that we would not be fighting a conventional war. Our enemy is strong in numbers, strong in arms, and strong in bane casting. Thus, we cannot face him in open battle. The Duke pauses for a moment and allows the regiment to grumble. Many had signed up expecting a quick, exciting campaign. Where the enemy is strong, we are weak, but we have our own strengths. If we are to win this war, we must fight intelligently. His Majesty has decided upon a campaign of skirmishes and raids. As a result, the majority of you shall be detached in small units to serve as His Majesty's pleasure. Expect to receive your order over the next 2 days. Your squadron commanders may require some of you to depart immediately. Speech delivered, the Duke sweeps his gaze back and forth over the assembled regiment once, as if capturing an image in his mind. Then, regiment dismissed. As the assembled regiment disperses, you see Captain Montez making his way through the crowd, handing out orders in thin envelopes to the squadron's 5 lieutenants, each assigned to command a troop of 40. You note a few of the other junior officers from your regiment heading away in groups, all in the same direction. You recognize Cornet Elson leading them. You ask them where they're going, or you ignore them and explore the town yourself instead. I will ignore them because, again, I haven't been friends with Elson this entire time. I probably shouldn't try now. So, you pick a direction at random and leave the square. After but a few minutes of walking along the broad cobbled streets, it becomes clear that Noringia is a town barely surviving. Shattered by a naval bombardment, then looted by the king's army, the little town's meager walls and keep have been wrecked almost entirely. As you walk along the outer boundary of the surviving town, you see the pitiful forms of refugees huddled in the shelter of the shattered walls, their existence only proven by the long shadows thrown upon the battered masonry by the sickly light of their sputtering cockfires, good lord. The sounds of human misery push against your ears like a gentle and piteous wave lapping up against a stone beach. The noise of starving children, grieving women, and despondent men assail you from every angle. A figure approaches from the huddled refugees. She is gaunt, almost skeletal. She looks 50, maybe 60, although that is the work of destitution and despair, not time. She straightens herself and manages to exhale a half breath of the air of command despite her piteous state. Officer, Southman officer, she begins in broken and heavily accented Tieran. 4 months ago, Southman soldier come. My son, they kill. My husband, they kill. My daughters, they worse than kill. Her expression hardens into one of desperate anger. Now I speak for all under walls. They is suffer, Southman. Suffer because your king. Suffer because you. Give coin. Coin your king steal from us. Else we starve. Well, I did say I was gonna be ruthless, so I'm going to give them nothing. They were on the wrong side. They deserved nothing from the victors. You return the old woman's gaze with the flint hard glare of your own. Your lips curl into a snarl as your hand goes for the hilt of your saber. Thoroughly cowed, the Antari woman retreats, empty handed. Was that justified? Of course it was. It is military practice to offer a besieged town good terms at the beginning of a siege and unconditional ones by the end of it. It was their fault that they put up such a stupidly hopeless resistance, and it was only fair that they paid the price for it. You walk on, convinced of the righteousness of your own argument. Okay. You continue, and I'm okay. Hold on. What did I do to my stats? Yeah, that kind of bumped that ruthlessness up there a little bit and bumped that cynicism up quite a bit too. So, yeah. You continue onwards as the sun sets and the sky turns into a dark, burnt red. You almost reach the shattered ruins of the town's landward gate when you hear a shouted greeting to your right. You turn to see a tall, brawny man in his late 20s sporting some of the most impressive sideburns you've ever seen. He wears a rather ill fitting dragoon uniform and carries a lit torch in his right hand. He approaches with a brisk, swaggering gait, a shotgun slung over his shoulder. Cornet Dracone, I presume. When you answer in the affirmative, he sketches a quick salute. Sergeant Salhaman Lanzaro. Lanzarel, sure. Our captain told me to find you. Not safe to be doing that alone, not after dark. We've whipped most of these moose shagging bastards well and good, but some aren't so easily cowed. A few of them still have it in their heads that their overlords may reward them if they draw a knife across one of our boys' throats every few days or so. Suddenly, the alleys seem to have grown a lot more menacing. The town is now more than dark, it is in shadow. Every corner and every house seems more threatening now that there is the possibility of a hidden ambusher with a knife hiding in the shadow of every stray barrel or fence. If you don't mind, sir, I'll show you where the officers are billeted. The two of you make idle conversation as you walk across town. You feel assured that while any lone idiot might attack a single unprepared Tierran, two soldiers armed with weapons and a lit torch would give any would-be assassin pause. I was one of the first men to land on Antari's soil 4 months ago, boasts the sergeant. Was 2nd Battalion, 4th Regiment of Foot. Come to think of it, the man does not seem less at ease with his uniform jacket than a sergeant with some years' service would have any right to be. If he had, up until very recently, worn the burnt orange of the line infantry, that would certainly explain his discomfiture. I have some advice to offer you, lad, if you'll have it. Of course. Andrew gives a rough grin. He stands up a bit straighter as he speaks. All right, lad. You want to stay alive out here? Remember this. The Antari aren't hares on your father's estate. They aren't foxes. They aren't wolves. And no matter what they... Oh, okay. They aren't foxes. They aren't wolves. And no matter what they'd have you think, they aren't bears. They're folk. Thinking, breathing folk. And we've just invaded their homeland. Lanzaro takes a deep breath as he pauses for a moment as if he were about to say something truly distasteful. We lost 50 men storming the heights outside the city, another 30 digging saps to the walls. When we finally led the king's army into the city, we left 200 men dead behind us. There wasn't enough of a 2nd Battalion left to reform into a company. They sent the officers back to Atoria to put together a whole new battalion and left the rest of us up here for the other regiments to gobble up. Some captain in your regiment was told I could handle a horse, so they gave me this jacket and told me I was one of them now. You were quite shocked by the sergeant's recounting of the regiment's woes. To have had a battalion of 600 fighting men reduced to less than 40 was not something you had expected out of a single minor assault against a decrepit castle town. Lanzaro sees your expression in the guttering torchlight, and his mouth hardens to a thin slash across his face. You're shocked, I can tell. You saw those pathetic walls. You can imagine how many guns our fleet trained on them. They weren't what did it. Those walls were breached 3 hours after we finished our siege work. Do you know what did? 100 church hussars with flaming swords in hand and angel wings unfurled, ready to sally. A perfectly placed ambush by a dozen expert marksmen. A powerful banecaster, 8th or 9th caliber, calling up lightning and flames. The townspeople, given courage and aggression by the fact that they were defending their homes. I kind of want to say that, but at the same time, I don't want to sound like I sympathize with them. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say that. Lanzaro nods, the pain in his face obvious. You feel as if you had just told your favorite schoolteacher that his wife was cheating on him. Aye, that's right, sir. It was the townsfolk. When we broke in, the few professionals guarding the city who hadn't already deserted pulled back to the castle. We didn't face no soldiers at the beach or even at the walls. Lanzaro pauses for a moment, gathering enough breath. No soldiers, just folk like the ones back at home. Tapsters, bakers, tailors, smiths, them and their wives and their children. Half the bloody town turned on us as we came through. They shot at us with heirlooms and hunting pieces. They hacked at us with saws and dirks and saints' damned eating knives. They threw stones and bricks and cobbles and anything else they could lay hands on, and you almost know what he's going to say next. You have seen the burned wreckage which stand at the sole remnants of much of the town. You remember the huddled remnants of the former populace, sheltering in the shadow of the shattered walls. We killed them, damn near as many as we could, and they killed us. By the time we cleared the breach and the rest of the army came through, there was barely anybody left standing under our colors or theirs. Suddenly, the narrow street along which you and Lanzaro were walking along opens to a great mass of darkness. The town square, which has seemed so open and inert that afternoon, now seems a rolling expanse of vengeful shadows. You step along briskly as the chill night wind tugs at your jacket. Lanzaro pays it no notice, having long since grown used to this cold and bitter country. Lad, if you forget everything I've told you today, remember this. The Antari will fight us every step. Every single one of them will fight us if they've half the chance. Man, woman, or child, they come at you with a blade or musket. You don't hesitate. You cut them down. If you've a soft heart, you have no place in this war or any other. The sergeant stops in front of a large stone building. Here we are. Just go through the door. Good night, sir. With that, Lanzaro snaps off another salute and waits for you to return it before leaving at the entrance to what you assume must be the impromptu officer's barracks. As light from Lanzaro's torch retreats into the darkness, you can't help but think on what the sergeant had said. Was there really no room for mercy in a time of war? You were brought up to believe that fighting for your king was to be a noble and honorable pursuit. Instead, you've just been told that you may have to unflinchingly cut down women and children should they defend their homes. Such actions are inconceivable. This war should be conducted as a noble enterprise, not a massacre. Unjust. How can we claim ourselves on the side of right if we do not take pains to save as many lives as we can? A bitter necessity. The loss of life would be regrettable, but if it helps protect our own, so be it. A burden lifted. How can we expect to win a war without the ability to kill all of our enemies, not just the obvious ones? Oof. Oof. Again, I said I was going to be ruthless, so this is going to be a burden lifted. I am going to kill as many people as I possibly can. Yes, it is a relief, isn't it? After all, when your enemy could be anywhere, it makes sense to treat everyone as a potential enemy. I'm sure that's not going to bite me in the ass at all. All right. What has that done for my ruthlessness? It's at 75 now, and my cynicism is at 73. The barracks turned out to be a large, stately building of gray stone, built with the carved roofs and elaborate stone scrollwork of the Chian style. Judging by the expensive work on the mahogany door and the thick red carpets, the building had likely been the winter home of one of the great lords of the Antari Congress. The Tierran officers who had come before you have certainly left their mark. Every instance of the Antari double-headed eagle you come across has been defaced, sometimes brutally. One carving in the main hall, too big to be cut down, is instead draped with the griffin and tower banner of the United Kingdom. Despite the thorough job the first Tierran residents did of vandalizing the place, the furnishings were left mostly intact. As such, it is quite easy for the corporal at the door to find you a relatively undamaged room for the night. With the assurance that your personal effects are to be transferred from the Victorious in the morning, you proceed to your room. Your temporary quarters seem almost impossibly luxurious, especially after a few weeks in the cramped and constantly rocking cabin on the Victorious. Before you can work up the urge to do anything else, you sink into the too soft mattress of the ornate four-poster bed and fall into a deep, exhausted sleep. You wake in the morning to the sound of an insistent knock on your door. After taking a few moments to make yourself presentable, you open it to find Sergeant Lanzaro, almost exactly as you had seen him last night, ill-fitting dragoon jacket and all. He hands you an official-looking envelope stamped with the government seal, your orders. You are to command a patrol of 5 enlisted men, including a sergeant. Your small unit of 6 is to report to the commander of the outpost at the Karen River crossing in 4 days' time. Producing a map from his jacket pocket, Sergeant Lanzaro points out the location of your new assignment. You guess that it would take a day and a half of riding to get your new posting. Lanzaro, with his greater knowledge of the country and the roads, gives an estimate closer to 3 days. That would mean that you would only have a single day and night in Noringia before heading out to your new posting. In that time, you will be required to ready yourself with everything you need: a personal mount, and a veteran ranker for a sergeant to pick your enlisted men and advise you. Both the quartermaster's office and the personal assignment office work on a first come, first served basis, meaning that the earlier you request a horse or get your men recruited, the better quality they will be. What do you deal with first? Now this is one of those decisions that's kind of hard because if you have good stats, it's kind of, you can get a good horse, but I might want to get a better lieutenant. Excuse me, sergeant. So, I'm gonna select a sergeant and assemble my unit first. Because since my soldiering is quite good, I think my soldiering affects how good I am on the horse. So that means that it shouldn't really matter what horse I get. And I think there's actually a horse that's like pretty unruly that'll always be there one way or the other. And I think I can get that one and use that one. So select a sergeant and assemble my unit first. There's no room for the thousands of soldiers in the king's army within the walls of a town the size of Noringia. While Bane-blooded officers like yourself get comfortable billets, the common soldiery must seize houses from the local populace or set up tent camps outside the walls. As a result, the men in charge of looking after them must move with them. The officers in charge of personnel for each regiment make their office in a large semi-ruined farmhouse outside the walls. You meet with your regimental clerk, scanning paperwork and regulations under the light let in by the half-collapsed roof. Standard procedure stipulates that the commanding officer of a newly formed combat unit must choose his own sergeant who, being more suited to judge and choose men of a similar low station, will pick the rest of the unit. The clerk sends a runner out to find candidates available to serve under an officer with your lack of seniority. You'll get the bottom of the bloody barrel, of course, Landrell says quiet enough so that only you could hear him. A just commissioned cornet won't have much of a chance getting a good sergeant. The more senior officers will have snapped them up already. Soon, the runner returns with 3 men, each wearing the gray tunic of the Royal Dragoons and sporting 2 yellow chevrons on each sleeve, corporals with the appropriate seniority to be eligible for promotion to sergeant. The first to enter is Corporal Hernandez, a respectable young man with unkempt whiskers and a mop of long black hair. It only takes you a few minutes of conversation with him to realize that he is well read on the art of war and has a head full of ideas for the ordering and training of fighting men. The second candidate is Corporal Harlick, a large two-fisted fellow with 10 years of service behind him. Boisterous and hot-headed, he is exactly what you expect of a sergeant, rough and confident. He tells you about his lads, a group of high-spirited ruffians more than willing to see some action under your command. The last corporal for your consideration is a familiar face, Fenton, the eldest son of your mother's lady maid. You recall that he had left to join the army some time ago. You remember him as a good-natured lad, faithful to his friends and your family. However, he still seems like the bluff servant boy you had known as a child. It is clear that he sees men below him as friends or brothers, not as subordinates. You find it hard to believe that your old friend would be very good at keeping order in the ranks. And again, my stats also affect this because you'll see this later on, where basically you're going to have a stat for the soldiers under your command, and then you're going to have your own stats. So naturally, with me being better at soldiering, I can kind of compensate for his lack of soldiering, and so on and so forth. So like if I have lack of charm, then if I get a corporal with with some charm onto them or whatever, then there you go. So, however, I'm going to choose Lanzaro. I decide that none of these men will do. Lanzaro is still unassigned. Might I request for him instead? The clerk is surprised at your question, but nowhere near as startled as Lanzaro himself. All due respect, sir, I'm too new. I don't know the men. I don't know the kit. You overrule his objections. Convinced by your insistence, Lanzaro finally gives in and accepts his new place in your unit. As soon as you dismiss him, he heads out, promising to return with the best men he can find. And I think from what I remember, Lanzaro kind of gives the best advice overall. I don't know if he's available if you don't, if you choose to get a horse first, but I think he is. So yeah. 2 hours later, with the sun nearing its apex, Lazaro returns, 4 men in tow. All of them look big and healthy. Indeed, each seems to be a hardened professional, good at their jobs and ready for a long slog if necessary. I hope these will do, sir. You assure him that they will indeed do quite well. You instruct your new unit to assemble at the ruins of Noringia's landward gate at 8 o'clock the next morning, giving you plenty of time to finish your business in the town. You and Lanzaro make your way to the pastures outside of Noringia's ruined town walls as the sun begins its long descent from its apex. The establishment of Noringia as the main port of arrival for the king's army has made it a feeding ground for those willing to make a profit out of the war. Accepting this as a fact of campaigning, the quartermasters of the royal army have set up their offices outside the walls. The grasslands outside the walls are now covered with orderly rows of tents and pavilions. The quartermaster's office is a large circular pavilion made of dull gray cloth. You barely have time to enter before the man at the desk sees the spurs on your boots and directs you to the stablemaster's tent on the other side of the assembled tent city. It takes you half an hour to make your way to the correct tent. The stablemaster's pavilion is a small, half open canvas structure hosting a series of manned desks and very little else. Behind the tent stands a large corral made from the rough hewn logs. Okay, the horses wandering upon the churned up turf of the corral are hardly prized specimen. They are almost all mares, considered to be more tractable and better behaved, but smaller and with less raw power. Most of the horses available look sickly and malnourished. Their eyes are sunken, their coats dull, and you can see the ribs sticking out from the bodies of the worst afflicted. Clearly, the long sea voyage and the makeshift conditions under which they are being housed have not done the poor animals any favors. Lanzaro does mention an alternative, though. Several horse merchants, both foreign and local, have set up shop in the tent market. The scarcity of tolerable mounts for the king's army have driven horse prices up, and these merchants have clearly come to profit. Regardless of their motives, these private sellers do offer superior horse flesh for a price. Just be careful, sir, he advises. A big charger may look impressive on the field, but stallions are nasty tempered and stubborn cusses. Find yourself a mare or a gelding if you want something easier to ride. So, that's the thing. Yeah. And again, my soldiering is pretty high, so I could probably get away with it, but I'm not sure. Um, hmm. And the horses here are shite. And of course, I don't have much money. I only have 110. And that's the other thing too. You have to, in order to get promotions, you have to turn around and pay for it. So you're gonna need money in order to pay for those things, unless you just do ridiculously good things in combat, which I probably could do because I have very high combat stats. But combat goes over different things. It's not just the fact that you fight good in combat; it's the choices you make that lead up to victory. So, hmm. I don't think I've actually ever requisitioned a horse from the official stables. Oof. Well, let's see if I can buy a horse. Let's see if I can buy one. Let's see. Coming to the decision that a few extra crowns will be of little use if you are caught with an inadequate horse in combat, you decide to spend a little bit extra to acquire a more impressive and capable mount. And I don't even know if I have enough money. Many of the horse merchants have already closed up shop, having sold their stock of mounts for the day. After 2 hours of searching and haggling, you and Lanzaro examine your options as meager as they are. A gray mare named Faith, a stolid, timid-looking animal with a few white spots on her neck. Although smallish and hardly impressive, she seems reliable and healthy. Her owner is willing to part with her for 20 crowns. The only other horse you find for sale is expensive beyond the pale, but clearly the finest horse in the entire camp. A gigantic black stallion named Thunderer, a mount suited for a Knight of the Red or a general. Stallions are notoriously hot-headed and difficult to control, but you have no doubt that you will cut a dashing figure perched atop such a magnificent animal. He commands the downright exorbitant price of 100 crowns. So I actually do have enough money for this, but if I do that, I'm not gonna have enough money later on in the game for different things. So I think you can purchase a promotion, and I think there's some other things that, I think like a sword, maybe some armor you can purchase. So yeah, I'm gonna buy faith. Yeah, because I mean, while I do think that it would do me some good to have Thunderer, both for my reputation and also because it's a stallion and stuff, 100 crowns is ridiculous. So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and buy Faith. You make up your mind about buying the mare, figuring that her humble reliability and easy manner to be well worth the cost. You go up to the merchant to purchase your new horse. Haggling ensues, but it's largely perfunctory. The seller refuses to budge from the advertised price of 20 crowns. The purchase completed, you stop by the armor's stablemaster tent to pick up a set of saddlery before leading your new horse to the officer's stables. You barely have enough time to catch a quick supper at the officer's club yourself before the sun goes down. Returning to your comfortable room for the last time, you write off a few letters to your family and go over your equipment and possessions, ensuring that all is in readiness. After a full night's sleep, you dress, wash, and assemble your kit, leaving out the door half an hour after sunrise. It is the work of a few minutes to saddle, feed, and prepare provisions for Faith and set off. You hear Sergeant Lanzaro long before you see him. As you draw closer, the sound of his dissatisfaction only grows louder. By the time you arrive, the bellowing sound of his voice has stopped, leaving only the veteran himself, along with 4 terrified dragoons, each with newly dulled metal fittings and long canvas covers over the shiny barrels of their carbines. Thus finally assembled, the six of you ride out the gate in single file along the old Imperial Highway. Glory or infamy awaits. All right, and now we're on to the next chapter. And as is per tradition, if anything bad happens, then this will be the point that I come back to. Let's see what we have here. Has anything changed with the state of the war? Okay, does not seem that anything has changed so far. And I don't think there's going to be much changing as far as things with the war just yet because we really haven't gotten into it. Now we're finna get into it though. But I think I'm going to go ahead and stop it right here since the next little part of the game will be a bit longer. But yeah, I think I'll kind of break it down into chapters like that. So in the next video, we'll pick up on chapter 4 wherein the cavalry of officers serves under a Knight of the Red and faces a Bane Lord of Antar. So that sounds like it's going to be kind of interesting. So if you like the video, like the video. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. I have a lot of things on the channel. I'm going to have plenty of other things on the channel. And if you want to see more games like this, let me know in the comment section. Because again, like I said, I don't have any problem playing choice of games. I have a ton of them. So, and there are plenty of them I would love to turn around and play. I would love to play this. I would love to turn around and play Fallen Hero. I would love to turn around and play the Hero Rise trilogy. I would love to play the Wayhaven. I think it's Wayhaven Chronicles or any other thing. Choice of the Vampire. I'd play that. Zombie Exodus. I'd play that. So yeah, just let me know. I am always open to suggestions. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.